Hello everyone, good morning. Today is our third event, Leadership, Rights and Media. We are hosting those liberal dialogues started from Trieste, and we will continue. So let me do the greetings from Fondazione Luigi Einaudi in partnership with the Open Society Foundation Western Balkans. I will have the privilege to introduce all the moderate all the discussant. But let me first of all thank the Europe House to host us today, and also our pillars, Marko, Novakovic and Professor Irena Ristic, because without them this event wouldn't be possible. Of course, all other people, the staff. So I will give directly the floor to Mr. Radmin Dvorak, who is the head of the Press and Information Unit delegation of the European Union in Serbia. Thanking also the delegation itself to accept our invitation. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Many thanks for the floor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, professors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this gathering, which we are so glad to host at our Europe House. You might have heard that before, but I would like to underline that EU enlargement remains at the top of our EU agenda. While there is a pressing geopolitical urgency to accelerate EU accession process, we cannot afford to allow for shortcuts on the fundamentals. The accession process is and remains merit-based. The fundamentals in the EU accession jargon are about the rule of law, the protection of human rights and high standards of democracy, as much as economic convergence. All these dimensions go hand in hand if we want to achieve sustainable development and eventually EU membership. The European Union is not merely an economic club. It is an international organization based on certain values: human rights, democracy, the rule of law are part of the EU's founding principles. But standards that reflect these principles need to be constantly promoted and protected. We know very well that they cannot be taken for granted. Just look at the global map right now. The EU accession requires leadership, and this brings us to the topic of our today's dialogue. Leadership both on the side of the EU member states and candidate countries. On the one hand, EU member states need to show leadership to be up to the geopolitical challenges we are going through. The EU needs to reform itself to be ready for enlargement. And it also needs to deliver on its commitment to integrate countries that meet accession criteria. On the other hand, EU candidate countries also need to show leadership to undertake difficult reforms and to promote reconciliation and dialogue, both internally and in the context of good neighborly relations. This, of course, requires a clear vision that places the future of the country above day-to-day, sometimes boring politics. Leadership also means creating space for an inclusive dialogue to discuss most difficult issues. Indeed, reforms that acceding countries need to undertake require a broad societal consensus across the political spectrum and various stakeholders, including various interest groups such as civil society, business sector, and local authorities. Also, media freedom and media pluralism are part of the backbone of any democratic system. Journalists should provide citizens and decision makers with accurate, verified information, as we know. This is crucial also in the EU accession context, especially bearing in mind the number of false narratives that are being spread, including, unfortunately, also on EU and EU accession related issues. Free media are watchdogs that help societies hold those in power accountable. And none of this can be achieved, of course, in an atmosphere where journalists do not feel safe or where the work of independent media is constrained. It is important to highlight that even in our democracies, our rights and freedoms should never be taken for granted, as they are under heavy strain in many places, including inside the European Union. Our institutions have stepped up efforts to promote and defend democracy and human rights, both internally and in candidate countries. I'm sure you know this very well, but for example, the European Democracy Shield is one of those recent initiatives presented by the European Commission to strengthen democratic resilience, protect media freedom, and counter authoritarian influence both within the EU and in candidate countries. Under this umbrella initiative, the European Commission made several proposals to counter in a more effective way disinformation and foreign interference, to boost media freedom and media pluralism, and to address democratic backsliding. EU candidate countries, ladies and gentlemen, will not be left behind. We will support them in protecting and promoting their democratic resilience. Dear honorable guests, let me conclude by thanking you once again for coming to our Europe House to participate in this dialogue, and let me wish you a fruitful day full of interesting conversations and useful takeaways for your future work. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dvorak, for this very fruitful introduction. I will launch now the little video that Andrea Tracogna, the Dean of MIB School of Management of Trieste, did for us. I would like, first of all, to let you know that MIB is very engaged in this initiative, which is our one of the partner of the initiative. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome at the Liberal Dialogues, the initiative promoted by the Fondazione Einaudi and the Southeast Observatory. I'm the Dean of MIB Trieste School of Management, a school that is eagerly supporting both the initiatives, the Southeastern Observatory and the Liberal Dialogues. We are fully aligned with the aims of the observatory. That is to promote democratic resilience, to analyze trends, and also promote cooperation in the southeastern Europe. We, as MIB, we are a bridge, an institutional bridge between academia, society, and business. And we are also a geographic bridge, as we are located in Trieste, which is right, at the border between the former West and the East. So we have always been in a position to promote cooperation, to promote democracy, and to develop human capital. And we are so happy to have this opportunity to get to know the young generations and to confront with them and to spot talents for the future leaders. Talents that we can help make aware of the challenges that society is facing today, and make them aware also of the importance of institutions such as free markets, and leadership values. We are a business school, but we not only promote managerial training, but we also promote values. And we are so happy that with the help of Fondazione Einaudi, we are also able to offer you all, if you are interested into, full tuition waiver to attend our next 37th edition of the MBA in International Business, which is opening on October 2026. You will find all the information on our website, and if you happen to be interested in continuing your training, then we are looking forward to receiving your candidature. In the meantime, we wish you a very fruitful and pleasant morning and attendance to the Liberal Dialogues. Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you.
Thank you very much to Andrea Tracogna, and he reminded us about the grants, because we have 4 grants for students. I remind you that the idea is to have a little report of 2 pages from you students to be sent, and we will have a commission to study it, and then the grant would be sent. Now I give the floor to Eva Chuk, journalist and Southeast Europe scientific coordinator. Please, Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. So thank you all for being here, and also thank you for those who are following us on streaming. Hvala svima što ste danas ovdje. Ovo je druga stanica Observatorija za jugoistočku Europu van Italije i 3. etapa projekta Liberal Dialogues nakon Trsta, gdje smo odlučili da smestimo ovaj observatoriju u gradu granica i susreta. Ja sam, kako je Renata kazala, koordinatorka naučnog komiteta Observatorija za jugoistočku Europu i odgovorna za observatoriju u Trstu. Naš cilj je da susretnemo sa mladima, da slušamo mlade koje tražu promjenu. Da uz podršku stručnjaka želimo da mladima pružimo alate za ostvarivanje promjena i da im omogućimo prilike za umrežavanje sa ostalim zemaljama u regionu. Uz podršku univerzitetima, istraživačkim i akademskim institucijama kao i javnim telima i da izgradimo mreže kao bismo razmenili i iskustva između onih koji su već članovi Evropske unije i onih koji teže da joj se pridruže. So this is our second stop outside Italy for our observatory. And the third stage of a Liberal Dialogue project, our city is in Trieste, the city of borders and encounters. Our goal is, as I said, also I tried to say in Serbian, to meet young people, university, research and academic institutions and public bodies, and to build networks in order to exchange experience between those who are already members in the European Union and those who aspire to join it. The observatory was launched by Fondazione Luigi Einaudi from Rome in partnership with Trieste School of Management, who gave the observatory the seat right in Trieste. Liberal Dialogues is a transnational educational and civic initiative designed for young people with the aim to foster critical dialogue, regional cooperation, capacity building, and so on. And in this mission, we received the support of the Open Society Foundation, Western Balkans, and Generali. The observatory benefits also from the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European Commission. So before we start, we would like to thank those who are hosting us, the Europe House here in Belgrade, the European Commission, and also the Embassy of Italy in Italy. So thank you for supporting us. And thank you also to discussants, all of you, Fabio Padovano, Sofia, Ventura, Marko, Novakovic, and also Renata is our project manager. I will now give the floor to them, but let me stress on a very important goal for us. We really would like to involve as much students as we can, students and young people young leaders. Our objective is to build this group of young intellectuals who will be part of the network and with whom maybe we would like also to build the program and the contents of the next edition of our project next year. So I kindly invite all the professors to help us in this mission and young students to apply for the scholarships and to write this very short report about the topic, the Europe I would like. So I will give now the floor to Renata Gravina and let's start with the work. Hvala vama na svemu.
Correctly, let me thank Francesco Magna, who is the first secretary head of political section on the press office of the Italian embassy in Belgrade, which hosted yesterday us really kindly and warmly. I would now give the floor to Professor Sofia Ventura, which is Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Bologna, essayist and also consultant. She will speak about state, pluralism, and individual rights. I would just ask you to not to be too long. I will raise my hand to let you be a little short, as to help us to dialogue at the end of the session. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this very important event. And my topic today is on the relationship between the state, democracy and liberal democracy, and the protection of rights. And my thesis is that we need today a wider framework of protection of our individual rights in our democracies, and that framework today is Europe. So let me begin from the beginning of the modern state in Europe. You know that the modern state is the product of the long history of European continent. And we must bear in mind the fact that the modern state actually emerged, first of all, to provide security inside the political community and against threats from outside. Inside, the state had to impose order, pacify conflict, control violence, and outside, it had to defend territory and sovereignty. In the age of the Ancien Régime, the absolute state, political legitimacy rested, first of all, on authority, sovereignty, stability, and security. First of all, security. But then, gradually, something changed. And from the 18th century in England and Great Britain, and then in the European continent in the 19th century, a new model emerged. Perhaps, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, a new model emerged, and this model was the liberal state. Power was no longer justified only by order, by security. Power had to accept limits, recognize liberties, and act under law. So there were some important turning points. The long history of the English monarchy since the Magna Carta of 2015 until the 17th and 18th century. But another very important turning point was the French Revolution, with the very well-known Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, the Declaration of Man and Citizens' Rights, when the idea of individual rights for the first time clearly emerged. Then there was also an important revolution outside Europe, in the United States. The first written constitution after the American Revolution, a very important constitution that established the idea of check and balances, that is, and also the idea of rule of law. Then the revolutions in the European continent in the 1830, 1848, very important revolutions because with these revolutions, monarchy was obliged to grant constitutions. So also the idea of constitutions, the modern constitutions emerged in the European continent, and so also the idea of rule of law. Then between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, also another model emerged, that is the liberal democratic state. Political participation widened, representation widened, rights were no longer conceived only for narrow elites, and that's why a process developed, the so-called process of democratization, thanks also to the development of political parties, mass political parties like socialist parties, Catholic and religious parties that had a very important role in the development of democracy. So we had first the absolute state without the recognition of individual rights, then the important phase of the liberal state, or also called the constitutional state, that permitted the recognition and the first implementation of individual rights, then the extensions of these rights with the process of democratization. So the state has had a very important role, an historical role, in recognizing individual rights and in enforcing and defending individual rights through important tools like the law, the constitutions, institutions like the parliament, with its central role in controlling the government. So the state has had this very important role in recognizing and defending individual rights. But the problem today is that the state is no longer sufficient. The so-called national state is no longer sufficient. It's also, it's essential yet, but it's not sufficient. Why? Because of two main reasons. Nowadays, we can see that liberal democracy can be eroded from within, on one side, and on the other side, it can be pressured from without. So we have internal and external threat. The first one, the internal threat. The internal threat is an internal, we have the potentiality of an internal erosion of liberal democracy, because democracy do not die only through coup, military takeovers. They can be weakened also gradually, also by elected governments, elected governments, even if elections survive, can weak judicial independence, can weak check and balances, can reduce media pluralism, and can use state institutions in a partisan way in order to reinforce the power of central government to the detriment of civil society and institutions also of the civil society and other political institutions like the judicial system or the parliament. And a very important example is the example of Hungary. At least until 2 days ago. Hungary is a clear example of democratic backsliding since 2010 when Fidesz and Viktor Orban returned to power. And it's a clear example of how constitutional and legislative reforms can erode the different aspects of the liberal and constitutional state. Check and balances, the judicial system, the anti-corruption safeguards, media pluralism in particular is very important. So Hungary shows that democratic erosion can unfold gradually without violence sometimes and from within under formally competitive elections. On the other side, we can have external pressure, in particular from authoritarian powers, even if internal and external pressure can be strongly connected. The external threat can have can be shaped in many ways, but it's not only a military threat or a diplomatic threat. It can be also a threat through tools like communication, like information or disinformation. And we speak about, to this concern, of sharp power. I think that you know this term, this concept. What is sharp power? Sharp power is a kind of exercise of power, different from soft power, because it's not attraction, it's not persuasion, it is rather penetration, manipulation, distortion, strategic interference, and is usually used by authoritarian powers, and today is strongly used, for example, by Russia, or by China. And we in Europe know very well this kind of sharp power, both from Russia and China, even if the sharp power of Russia is more evident. So the goal of authoritarian powers that use sharp power is exactly weaken the democratic environment, blurring, for example, truth and falsehood, deepening mistrust toward institutions and people who are inside the institution, increase polarization within democratic societies, and also distort how citizens perceive reality. So sharp power is really a strong threat for our democracy, and the effect of the act and the effect of sharp power are strongly monitoring from the offices of the European Union, for example. For example, the European External Action Service of the European Union, in his year after year, in his reports, has documented many cases of disinformation and sharp power coming from some authoritarian powers. Here we have some result of the last report of March 2026 that shows a systemic threat to democratic societies through sharp power. So, in this situation, we understand very well why Europe matters. Why Europe matters? Europe matters exactly because if the state remains necessary in order to defend individual rights and rule of law, it is no longer sufficient. And so we must remember that Europe is not only a market, is not only a regulatory space, is also a framework where some values can be defended. We must remember, for example, the Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union that states that Union is founded on human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, human rights. So Europe act or should act in order to defend these values, and in respect to what the national state can be, Europe can add some activities very important to defend the rule of law and, in general, the constitutional and liberal right. It can provide common legal standards, it can provide supranational monitoring, and also pressure mechanism when democratic standards are determined. Obviously, the European Union has many instruments to do so, and is also developing new instruments. For example, before I cited the case of Hungary. Actually, until 2020, 2021, the action of the Commission, but also of the European Parliament, was not so strong against the infringement of the rule of law by the Hungary of Orbán and Fidesz, but in the last year, after 2021, the situation has changed, and there is a new awareness of the necessity to act against the attack to democracy from within, in particular from political parties of the radical right, like Fidesz. But there is, and this is my last point, I think that I'm in time, okay. My last point is the fact that Europe have another kind of threat that is an external threat that interact also with internal actors inside our democracies, because the threat coming from outside is not only an informational threat, is not only sharp power, because we must bear in mind that sharp power is part of something larger, that is often the hybrid war, like the war that Russia is waging not only against Ukraine today, but also against Europe in many different ways. For example, attacking with a cyber operation, attacking infrastructures, informational infrastructures, but also energetic infrastructures, not only in Ukraine, but also in countries of the European Union. So my last point is that today, the framework, the European framework that has become a necessity in order to defend our liberal democracy is also a framework where a strong defense must be built, a strong common defense must be built. And to this regard, it's very important what Europe is doing, supporting the war in Ukraine, the war of Ukraine against Russia in order to defend not only its autonomy, sovereignty, but also in order to defend the eastern border of Europe, because I think that we must conceive the war in Ukraine, not only the war in Ukraine, but the war in Europe, in the eastern border of Europe, but because even if Ukraine is not yet part of the European Union, is since 2017 a country associated to the European Union, and now, how you know very well, is also a candidate to the membership of the European Union. So my conclusion is that in Europe, we have known an evolution of the modern state. First, at the beginning was the issue was the security, then the issue has changed, and the liberal state added limits on power and recognition of liberties. Then there was the liberal democratic state, but today the historical development reaches a new stage. And right, pluralism, and freedom still need the state, but they no longer need only the state, they need a wider space of protection, and that space today is Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ventura. We decided with Eva to at least to help one question to be done, just to break a little bit the discussion. So, is there anyone who wants who has a suggestion for Professor Ventura? Okay, if not, I will, because you made me think about the French cultural state. So my idea, as this project is a formation project, so it's a project of schooling. How, in your opinion, this sharpness could be avoided from a schooling perspective? How culture, how school could avoid this sharp perspective?
Yes, actually, culture is central in order to cope with these threats of sheer power, disinformation, post-truth. And it's not a case, for example, that in Ukraine today there is a strong effort exactly to use culture to counter the disinformation threat coming from Russia. So I think that school, university, formation in general is really important in order to give, especially to young people, the instruments in order to understand this kind of threats and how it works. In particular, how sharp power disinformation works. So I think that culture is essential, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I would give now the floor to Professor Fabio Padovano, which is full professor of public finance at University Roma 3 and also at Rennes he will do his speech about public debt and euro accession. Please, Professor, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Renata. Thank you very much, you all, for having invited me. So, what is the, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So my speech today is about public debt, which is a problem to which the European Union has devoted and is devoting considerable attention, and rightly so, but that Serbia doesn't have, in a way, or at least in a quantitative, significant way. And therefore, I would like to argue why it is still a problem, because public debt is difficult to reduce. In a way, public debt could be compared to that famous hit by the American rock band, the Eagles, at Hotel California. I don't know if you know the song. If you don't, I mean, that could be a takeaway from my speech. Go back and listen to it. Basically, the song says, we are programmed to receive. You can check it at any time you like, but you cannot ever leave. So once you enter, if you are a low debt country, it's easy to become a high debt country. But once you are a high debt country, it's very difficult to reduce it, public debt, and bring it back to the level where it was. And what I'm going to talk about today is why is that so? Well, okay, this is a diagram using OECD data about the public debt. There are several countries. In red is Italy. Then you have in orange the US, EU, and the OECD countries average. As you can see, there has been a spike during the COVID years, and then public debt has gone back, but not because the size of the debt has decreased, only because GDP has started to increase again after the lockdown, and now we are back more or less on the steady state. So this is the situation, again, using OECD data for some countries. Italy today, as of 2024, had a public debt of 137% of GDP. Serbia has only 41%. It's less than Slovenia, it's less than Germany. The US now has a debt of 123% over GDP. That measure, this is a comparison on GDP, because it's again, it's a kind of measure of your ability to pay, okay? Because GDP can be considered as a tax base. But now let us consider this tax base in a slightly different manner, on a per capita level. Okay, so if we were to pay a tax to zero the public debt today, how much would a Serbian household have to pay, a Serbian individual? Less than 5,000 euros, which is not, I mean, a Jean de Poche, but nevertheless, it's not very much. For Italy, it's 50,000 euros per capita. So, for instance, if you are a household of 4 and you want to zero the public debt, the tax you will have to pay, the real estate or the patrimonial tax you will have to pay, property tax you will have to pay is 200,000 euros. Do we have this money, our households? This is how much we personally are indebted. And if I were an American, I would have many more, another reason, not just the president that represents me, but also the public debt that it engenders to worry about, because it's 100,000 euros per capita for every American. Okay, so it's a serious problem, also using these numbers, but it is a problem also because once you are a high debt country, high debt generates problems of economic instability. I mean, it's easy to understand who is going to pay. Debt today is future tax liabilities. And that also engenders intergenerational stability. If debt is issued today, that means that somebody today enjoys consumption that somebody else in the future will have to pay for once the debt is no longer redeemed. And I'll give you 2 pictures about it. I mean, in terms of economic stability. Oops, sorry. how do I go back? Okay. In terms of economic stability. Okay, this is a picture that was taken in Greece during the riots of 2011, 2012, where there were people protesting against the debt-reducing policies that were imposed by the Troika. And this one here is the dog Canellos, who was barking also his opposition against these measures that were supposed to be introduced by the Troika. And he was not aggressive, but was very vocal. And unfortunately died recently, possibly because of the tear gas that he had to inhale because he didn't have the mask. So this is an example. Also animals are against the reduction of public debt. Second point, this is a book, a more serious one. This is a book by Paul Krugman, The Age of Diminished Expectation. Paul Krugman is an American economist who won the Nobel Prize in 2008. And he argued, and also provided evidence, that my generation, again another song by The Who this time, my generation is the first generation since the 30 Years' War, 17th century, that enjoyed lower living standards compared to the previous generation. I mean, every generation after another, after the 30-year war that destroyed 1/3 of the European population, the Italians here probably have read the Promessi Sposi and the Black Plague of Milan and so on and so forth. But at that period, that was the only generation that enjoyed living standards that were worse than those of the previous one. Then there was a succession of generations that enjoyed always higher living standards than their fathers because of technological progress and because of the diffusion of information, property rights, and so on and so forth. Okay. The size of the public debt of today and the intergenerational transfers that that generates are large enough to overcome the positive effect of technological progress, because we cannot say that there is no technological progress or that there is a technological slowdown. That is nowhere to be seen. However, the size of the public debt and the redistribution from the young generation towards the old generation that public debt engenders are stronger than the effect of technological progress. Okay, so if this is a problem, of course, people should be well informed about it. And this is the situation in Italy. Okay, these are the internet searches on public debt in Italy. Unfortunately, they are in blue. And in red, you have the searches for the results of the Serie C, the third level soccer championship in Italy, where countries such as Viterbese, Pistoiese, Gian Erminio are playing. They would be serious contenders to the current national soccer team of Italy, probably, but not to everybody else. But as you can see, the only moment when people were almost more, that the concern for public debt was similar to the one of Serie C was during the lockdown, where Serie C was not playing and public debt was soaring up. But it was still 1/3 of internet searches, okay? So the problem is also lack of information, lack of interest. People don't know that we have this problem. And therefore, that is the reason why it is difficult to solve the problem of public debt. There is no political support for debt reduction policies. Nowhere to be seen. And I'll show you why. We have, some colleagues of mine from the University of Milan, Sacred Heart, have conducted an experiment to which I have slightly participated, where we have exploited information about public debt in a sample of Italian households in 2023, using the, oh gosh, what is, this thing is not working as I was. Okay. So we have a sample that was constructed by Ipsos, a polling institute of 1,575 individuals, to which we basically have asked information about the situation of the Italian public debt to check how well they were informed. And then to 50% of them, we have provided the correct and accurate information, what in economic theory is called the treatment. Okay? So we have said to these people, okay, I mean, whatever your level information is, this is the situation as it is certified by the Bank of Italy. Okay? And this is debt in Italy, 144%. We didn't want to be too scary using per capita debt, so we use only debt to GDP ratio. We have said that the service of the debt, the interest payments that have to be made in order to pay the interest of the debt, which is an all-time law in Italy today, is 288 billion euros in 2024. So is 4 times as much the budget of the healthcare system in Italy. Then we have said, okay, well, look, this is the people and the institutions that hold the debt. Only 12% of Italian citizens are willing to subscribe government bonds. And in case you are interested in ecological transition, according to the European Parliament, the amount of investments that will have to be made in order to pursue these policies are simply considered to be enormous. And therefore, that would involve an accumulation of more and more debt. Okay? After that treatment, what happens? Okay, first of all, we have assessed the correctness, how many people have a correct information about public debt in a very general way. I mean, is it increasing or not? About 3/4 of the Italian respondents knew that public debt was increasing. But 25% of them didn't know anything about it. Okay? I simply don't know. Once they were given the treatment, when they were given the accurate information, the treatment basically worked well because those in gray are low knowledge people. They realized that the information was certainly new or quite new to them, and the high knowledge people found that information to be partially new or not new at all in greater number than those that didn't know anything about it. So the treatment was informative, okay? But then what happens once you are better informed? Do your ideas about whether debt is a serious problem or whether something should be about it, do they change? And so the question is, are you worried now about public debt? And as you can see, I mean, the people who were treated are now those who are in blue, okay? So people who are treated basically say, oh yes, I'm very much worried, or I'm considerably worried, and those who are not treated in gray are still a majority of those who say, well, I don't care. I mean, I don't think that concerns me. So then we see what should we do about it? Should we reduce the public debt? Everybody says certainly yes, but in the equal shares. It's not that the treatment changes something about the propensity to do something about the public debt. Okay? Probably yes, again, in equal shares. So the treatment basically makes people better aware of the situation, but still they don't want to do anything about it. Why is public debt a problem was the next question. Well, bankruptcy risk. Italy will follow the same destiny as Greece. That doesn't, I mean, people who are treated or people who are not treated don't have different opinions about it, but that is not the main concern. The main concern is that, okay, now if we have such a high public debt, we cannot spend more, and treated people are more concerned about it than non-treated people. Or maybe we could be taxed more, and again, treated people, better informed, are more concerned about it than people who are not well informed. And what about the future generation? That is another concern. But then, for the rest, there is no difference. And even there, I mean, the differences are not major. So people are basically like a kind of patient that is difficult to treat with a medicine. It's not responding. Okay? Now then we have asked which type of policies do you think should be implemented? And the question was, should we increase taxes? No. I mean, if you are better informed, the answer is no. Wait a second. No, we shouldn't increase taxes. Probably we should instead reduce expenditures. And among the treated people, doing nothing was a preferred option to those who were not treated. Okay? And this is about preferences. And then the question was, then what should the government do? I mean, suppose it's not your matter. I mean, it's something that has to be decided from high above. And the higher taxes, basically the treatment doesn't have any impact. Lower expenditures, yes, to some extent, the treatment has a marginal effect. Doing nothing, and I don't know where, more or less, the same result as before. Now, then, we have also asked which taxes should be increased. And now the answer really reveals the nature of the Italian taxpayer. Okay? Why? Because increasing the income taxes, no, wait a second. Income taxes is 75% of revenues, so if there is somewhere where money comes from, that is the personal income tax. No, don't touch the income tax. Okay? Second is consumption taxes, and VAT and so on and so forth. Don't take it, don't touch it again. Inheritance taxes, yes, please, increase inheritance taxes. In a way, it is as if you were saying, okay, let me die first and tax those who inherit from me if something is left behind, okay? So this is basically the attitude. And the other taxes are basically not really relevant. And in terms of should we reduce expenditures, which type of expenditure should we reduce? Public order, that's not probably the right thing to do. And infrastructure, which is basically, okay, don't touch what the state is giving to me personally, but let us reduce what the state is spending for in a collective manner. So those of you who have studied Guicciardini, and I'm sure Professor Sofia Ventura has done it very carefully, know that the Italians are the same as in the 16th century. They are very much concerned about their own particolare, okay? So the conclusion of the study, what can we say? On average, Italians are pretty well informed about the situation. 75% of Italians know that the public debt is increasing. I mean, I work also in France, and I can guarantee you that the information about the French taxpayer is worse. However, 25% of the respondents in a high debt country are not aware of the situation. They believe that debt is not increasing. But what is even more telling is that our information treatment makes respondents not concerned. I mean, it's like giving a medicine that, I mean, you're giving aspirin to a person that is suffering of cancer, okay? What are the changes? Basically nothing. Once people have accurate information, they are more afraid of bankruptcy, but for most of anything else, they are concerned about potential tax increases and spending cuts. And slightly, they are more concerned about future generations. So they want to die first, and then let the other deal with the debt, okay? So, and again, as I said, if expenditures have to be cut down, not on an individual basis, but not on transfers, but on capital expenditures, which is basically exactly the opposite of what any economist would say should be done, because if you increase public expenditures on capital expenditures, debt, GDP will increase, and therefore the debt to GDP ratio will go down. So basically, we are far away from having a correct support, sufficient support for a correct policy. So, to relate these findings to the Serbian situation and the process of integration into Europe, which is a community that basically is very concerned about debt. I mean, you are a low debt country, but remember that debt is like Hotel California. Don't enter, because once you are in, you cannot get out, okay? So remain a low debt country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Padovano. Do we have one question from, yeah, we have a lot of, so really, really short because, can we give them the microphone? Thank you.
I guess we were triggered by this last sentence about low debt. I'm not an economist, so my question is it really, I mean, this is not the whole picture. The whole picture requires, first of all, to get the structure of the debt, the interest rates of borrowing, the credit rating of a country. And I'm not sure if you compare Serbia to Italy and United States with the ratio that we have, you would come to the same conclusion that we are somehow in the best of position.
May I answer? Well, I didn't say that you are in the best of position. I'm saying that in the position that you are could become worse. And you should refrain.
That's our usual trajectory.
Well, I mean, you see, no, I mean, but generally, I mean, the point that I'm making is that public debt is something that is being accumulated little by little. For instance, the history of the Italian state, when Italy became a unitary state in 1861, the Italians did something really extraordinary. They subscribed the debt of the pre-unitary states. Okay? These were countries that didn't exist anymore. So it was not the concern of the new country to subscribe the debt of countries that didn't exist, and they were not responsible for. Still, they endorsed that country, that debt, because they said, we want to start as an honorable and creditworthy country. Then it took World War I. Before World War I, the situation was normalized. And then again, after World War I, things became really worse. And again, with the inflation of post-war World War II, that went down to 60%. But again, you're trading one type of crisis for another, as you were saying. I mean, debt is part of the picture. I mean, you could, if you reduce debt, you can inflate it away, but then you have inflation. Okay, so I mean, but it is important once you have a low level of debt. Certainly, I mean, with a low level of debt, it is easier to have access to international financial markets, but you have to do it with caution.
We have another question from the girl there. Then we will have time for the discussion, so we will keep...
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the role of trust in terms of per capita debt, because if Italian citizens and Serbian citizens as well, who don't really have a lot of trust in their governments, they're not likely to, because they see this as an investment, right? They're not likely to consent to higher taxes on anything. Not like we see in Scandinavia, who have a very high level of trust, or even Japan, who generally just borrow from their own citizens for their own purposes and don't do it like in the EU to help each other out, which is the whole point of the EU as well.
Well, trust is certainly important. And as you can see, only less than 25% of Italian citizens subscribe individually public debt from their own country, according to the Bank of Italy. So Italy has always been characterized by this very low level of trust in government. I mean, if you look at the readings, at the books by people like Robert Putnam, he has always underlined that the level of trust in Italy is not only towards the government, it's not only low, but is unequal between the north and the south. Okay? So that is one thing. I mean, the Italian debt is subscribed by institutions and by foreign subscribers to a very large extent. So these are very volatile type of subscribers. They can go away at the first crisis. Okay. In terms of mutual support, suppose that you were inside the European Union and Italy was knocking at the door with 130% of debt. Would you let us in?
Thank you. Keep your question, because then we will have another discussion, but I will add another perspective. Marko Novakovic, which is a full professor of international law at the Institute of International Politics here and Economics here in Belgrade. He will speak about freedom of the press and public opinion. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be very short. And I'm going to, one of the reasons because I'm not going to take much of time is because Professor Essa made some very important points about captured state. And as we all know that not only Hungary, but we have a very immediate example of that. However, it is not this erosion of democratic systems is not characteristic for the Western Balkans or so on. It's a global trend. And actually, we can say that the democratic backsliding or some type of autocratization is a global trend of the early 21st century. There's several studies that demonstrate that. One of them is the VDEM Institute's Democracy Report from 2026 from the University of Göteborg that says that nearly a quarter of the world's countries were undergoing autocratization in 2025. But what are the differences there? Are they all the same? Well, no. Some of those autocratic movements have much more impact in countries where institutions are not independent or developed enough. However, let's go a step back, and then where is the role of media freedom in these processes? Well, media freedom, actually the erosion of it, is one of the earliest indicators of democratic backsliding. So political actors in this kind of authoritarian entrenchment, they seek to capture media outlets and apply a regulatory pressure or economic leverage on media. Why is that? Well, there are several reasons behind that, but one of the main reasons is that media freedom protects against abuse of power and provides one very important element, actually the backbone of democratic society, and that's the accountability. This is something that is of utmost importance for any society, and this is why the role of state when it comes to media developed over time. You know, we had some major international acts that were protecting freedom of media, freedom of speech in a wider sense. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and several others for the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that was adopted in 1966, and it is in force since 1976, and they have generally the negative approach to the media freedom in the sense that they are protecting and actually preventing state from limiting the media freedom and freedom in general. However, that's not enough, and that's happened to. We have, for example, the case of the European Court of Human Rights, very famous case, Sunday Times versus the United Kingdom from 1979, that actually poses the positive obligations of government. So government has to protect, not only to abstain from the limiting media freedom. Governments have to protect the media freedom themselves, protect journalists, protect their sources, and this is the way that media can be independent. But what else media brings when they're independent? We have the accountability, because laws are not only have legitimacy from the way they are brought. I mean, there is very important step that is before entitlement of laws, and that's public discussion about that, the importance, what area of life we should normativize, and so on and so on. And this is the only way to do in modern societies is through providing this public sphere of communication. We can trace back the importance of this public communication and public sphere of back to Jürgen Habermas, and he wrote a lot about, I mean, despite all the disclaimers we have to do regarding his work, I think that it's very important that there is a way for dialogues. I mean, the name is Liberal Dialogues, this here. I mean, dialogues are very important. They are, again, a backbone of any democratic society. And this is why in the authoritarian regimes, the dialogues are prevented. Because when you have dialogues, then it's very hard to manipulate the media, manipulate the information. Dialogues are the crucial element of democratic society. And manipulation of media and information is not something new. I mean, we have manipulation of public opinion before Second World War, before First World War, we have after Second World War. So in so many levels and so many different ways, the governments used to influence, to curve and to change the general outlook on public opinion in order to mobilize the people for their cause. So we have that especially now, this is much easier, I mean much easier to do because of the digital media and digital communication. We have these attempts in the elections in the United States, for example. Ben Professor also made the important notes about the influencing information systems of other countries. So this is something that can be done much easier, although much more expensive than it used to be. But this is why the importance of this kind of keeping media independent and keeping this area of not only giving the area of dialogues, but enhancing those dialogues. This is the only way to prevent really harmful effect of these manipulations. Then I'm going only to come back and to talk about one more thing that I mentioned at the beginning, and that is the effect of authorization and this democratic backslide in the states throughout the world. They differ from country to country. They have different effects, and one of the major dams on this effect is the developed institutions. We're talking about the institutions and developing independent institutions here in Serbia for the last 30 years that I remember, and this is not. I have a fairly good memory, but I think it was the issue even before that, and I seriously we are really didn't do much in those 30 years. I really don't see the developing institutions, independent institutions that are able to sustain the change of political regimes, the change of the governments in such a way that they keep the same level of independence. I mean, there are some exceptions, but there are very few of those. So this is the one very important thing that has to be kept in mind, and any kind of if we are to make any kind of progress, regardless of the EU membership, you know, all the things that we are talking about when we're talking about EU membership is something that shouldn't be brought upon us like some kind of punishment. You have to do that, and then you will be a step closer. This is something that every democratic society should strive towards. You know, the independence of media, the rule of law. That's something that Serbian society is going to benefit either way, being in the EU, going towards EU or not. I mean, the EU is, we are at the European continent, so yeah, this is our natural habitat, but still all those things have to be done for the sake of the Serbian society itself. This is the one point. The other point is I would like to bring here is the independent institutions. Apart from the independent institutions are the merit-based recruitment. This is something that it has to be also very, very painful aspect of the Serbians, and not only Serbian, but general Western Balkan societies for many years. Now, I mean, it is independent institutions cannot function effectively without steady supply of high-quality people, and this is the only way for the institutions to sustain all the changes that we mentioned, the political changes, the government changes, and so on and so on. Because the independent institutions serve as an intermediary between the abstract legal norms and their concrete applications. So in order to be able to apply those abstract norms to our everyday life, you have to have developed institutions and high quality people working in those institutions that are able to put it in force and to really for the general publication, general public and every person to benefit from those. This is the only way that people are going to, I mean, people generally see the issues in the corruption that is endemic in this society and many other societies. They can see it when they're directly affecting themselves. So this is one other characteristic. It's not only, I mean, most of the people. It's not the characteristic of only Italians that are considering first and foremost their own benefit, their own issues. But here, the only way that I saw in the last 10 or 15 years I was working in the field is that people see constantly how bad corruption is without the corruption affecting them at that moment personally, is when they see that there are institutions who are really doing the work in a good and proper way. So this is something that really motivates people to further go to further sustain further changes and to be able to be driver of the change and not only somebody who is going to look for how that some issue is going to affect them in less harmful way. So it's so important that we have the institutions always communicating, always demonstrating that all those democratic values, rule of law, and so on, is something that it's really bring the better for the society in its entirety and for every person in the society itself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Novakovic. Do we have some question for him? Okay, if not, yes? Okay.
Oh, I can just say.
The microphone, because of the online people.
Sorry. I'm not from Serbia, but I've been reading about some infrastructure projects here, and I've been surprised by the variety and the really good quality media reporting on some of those challenges. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more to media freedom in Serbia at the moment, just for some greater context.
We have it's very hard to talk about media freedoms here in general. I mean, we have very divided society generally as we have. There are some, maybe you read about some kind of, there are several media that are considered as a free media that have this national frequency, that we have currently some issues about who is going to lead those media, who is going to be in charge of at the management positions there. So many people feel that the independence will be threatened if the managerial staff is changed. But generally, this is something that this lack of dialogue and lack in any kind of ability to talk about our differences is something that has been going on for many years now. So we literally have media that have totally opposite informations, providing totally opposite information on the same events. And we have one big portion of the people listening to only one media, and the other portion of the people listening only to the other media. And there are, of course, manipulation of the information constantly going on, but the problem is that they are not sanctioned. I mean, we have always manipulation of the information. There's something that is, unfortunately, it's not necessarily brought only by some kind of government doing that. We have the law, for example, I mentioned the merit-based employment. We have the journalist standards that are very low. We have the journalist profession generally here in many aspects needs to be improved, and this is another thing that should be considered when you take the picture of the media in Serbia. So currently we really cannot talk about we are very far from the position where media should be in any kind of democratic society in several levels.
Anyone?
Thanks to all panelists for insightful talks. I'm Marko Milenkovic. I'm a fellow at the Institute of Social Sciences in Belgrade and also at SAIS Europe in Bologna. So for Professor Padovano, actually, I think you touched upon this. We have a constant depth growth across the economies. Sometimes we have also spikes during the crisis and in our recent history. We had two with the financial and banking crisis, and then the huge one with COVID, which also opened the door for Europe getting adapted itself and kind of changing the paradigm. So what do you think, what happens the next time around when we have a major crisis? I mean, there is no other way but to resort to debt again, and we might have a new full-scale war around the corner. So how do we go out from that challenge?
Microphone.
Sure.
My talk was precisely on that point, namely, my point was try not to get in, not how to get out. Okay, so that is the main point. If you are a low-debt country, then you can still manage. If you are a high-debt country, then you face enormous difficulties. I mean, the only way out is making people more conscious of what debt actually is. It's not a distant, faraway problem. It's not a problem that economists discuss and governments have to deal with, and then we can somehow escape. Again, as my colleagues were saying, information is really important, because otherwise you cannot muster the support that is needed to implement policies that at least try to reduce it. I mean, of course, the reduction of debt is going to be a slow process. I mean, you cannot zero the debt from 1 year to another, of course. But also reducing it is difficult and requires a consistent type of effort. I mean, at the beginning of the 90s, Italy has tried to stabilize the public expenditures that were partly financed through debt. The part of public expenditure was represented by the pension system. Okay? And in a sense, I mean, several governments made of different ideological persuasions, made several efforts, but it took 15 years to bring back the Italian pensions to a fairly stable level. Okay? And they are not really financially stable now, but they are much more so than they used to be in the 90s. And also much more so than in other countries. So, I mean, it is a process that is very long, and for that you need public support from both types of political coalitions, and therefore you need a lot of information.
Any other question? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to continue on this topic, but let's, maybe a bit polemic. Aren't we, I mean, understanding the whole need for information and freedom of information, but aren't we expecting too much of an individual to process all these complexities? And aren't we, I think, a bit on this, either taking populism for given or for granted, and not even questioning that when you said several times in order to change something, you need the support of the, and always this, we need the support. Of course, there is a support, not dictatorships can, but because you also mentioned this issue, or this example with a patient. If I have cancer, do I really have to know all the details, or do I just need a good doctor who will sort out the problem for me? I cannot...
You have to go to the doctor first.
Yeah, and that is maybe more the question. Are we missing the right doctors and not informed patients?
Okay. Should I answer? Okay, well, your point is very well taken, and thank you for your question. I'm doing research in something that is related to that, on political budget cycles, namely the tendency of governments to spend more and spend more in deficit right before the election in order to secure votes. Now, it has always been, I mean, economists have always said, I mean, there are economists that agree with each other is a rare event, but if there is something on which economists all agree with among themselves, is that before elections, politicians go basically over the top and overspend and increase deficit in order to buy votes. So there is evidence that countries where media are more free and people are better informed, lower digital divide and so on and so forth, people are better informed, tend to allow, voters tend to allow this type of misbehavior, manipulation of the economy a lot less. However, not recently. Why? Because of excess of information and fake news and so on and so forth. So what I have tried to see is what is the possible medicine for this explosion of information that makes it more difficult for individuals to sort the signal out of the noise. And that is education. We have, with a colleague of mine, we have checked the level of the PISA scores of different countries before and the political budget cycles. And countries characterized by a higher PISA score, namely a higher level of education, even if PISA scores are measured for non-voting individuals because they are fundamentally younger, I mean high school students, but nevertheless, they are even more important than tertiary education, possibly because tertiary education is not attended only by people who are voting in that country. But without going technical, the point is that the better medicine against this lack of information is the education of individuals, okay? And I would say that another good medicine, and very needed one, is the quality of journalists. Because if journalists are better informed and are better able to explain what, say, economists say, but just limited to their universities and their conferences and so on and so forth, we need a cascade of information that starts from research, then goes to foundations that create this type of dialogues, and then from there to the public at large through the mediation of journalists and so on and so forth, okay? And then people eventually will learn. We have to have a little faith in people, like Woody Allen used to say, and because also if we look at the past, I mean, before we were denying people the right to vote, because, I mean, if you look at Benjamin Constant and the fact that the right to vote was awarded to 2% of the population, and possibly, if you excuse me, only to the 2% of the male population, and that was because the rest was considered not to be trustworthy and not to be competent enough. And still today, after the results of referenda like Brexit and so on, people are playing with this idea that we should deny the right to vote to people who are too ill-informed. But again, let us have trust in people, trust in journalists, let us economists speak their mind and be listened to, and maybe things will improve. I don't know.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Professor Novakovic. As you spoke about public opinion, my idea is if, let's say, private opinion is in a way affected by this attack, let's say, that is being I mean, felt by society. I mean, if this effect is also becoming like a private way of censoring itself. I don't know if I'm clear.
Well, yes, of course, but now we are going into the part of that is also important, and my colleagues mentioned it, that's the education. You know, the education also is very important in order not only to be able to obtain information, but also to be obtained to scrutinize it, and to not take the information for granted. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have these people who are questioning everything, and then we have these theories and so on. So it is very important to be, I mean, for me, but I'm coming from academia. The biggest problem is that people generally stop reading, and it's taking them too much time. It's much easier to take some idea that's interesting, especially because this is a bit different than most of people think, and then you say, okay, I'm now found something that is much more, that's something that's behind the scene, so this makes me very, intelligent and not just like the other ones, but it's so time consuming to read and to really acquaint yourself with all the aspects of the elements that you are very interested in. Of course, you cannot do research on every aspect of your life. That's where prioritization comes to the scene. But generally, I think that people, for example, I know there was my colleague Jovanovic and my colleague also, I know for a fact that our generation is used to spend so many hours, so many days researching something so small that sounds so insignificant, that now people are really, okay, even in the academia, in the research department, they're like, okay, I'm going to check on internet on that and that's really not the way that on a long term you really acquire knowledge. And this is the biggest one. Spent 4 years writing in the library, writing, PhD thesis and so many things. I had, if I had ChatGPT and all those things at hand, I would be able to do much more things, other things in my life. But generally, this is the way of creating your own opinion. For me, it's really, really something that is of utmost importance. And this is the only way for you to be able to obtain the information and to scrutinize it in an appropriate way to get something that is closest to the objective truth, if that's something that actually exists at all.
Eva? Pietro will.
Question for Professor Novakovic, because you said that for the institutions, for changing the institutions, you need high quality people. So I know that Serbia is experiencing now a very complex moment with the students protesting against this institution, against the rule of law that is missing here, against the corruption. What are students asking? We know the reasons why they are on the street and why they are protesting. They need education. What they expect from the institutions and from European Union. What do you think?
Well, I cannot speak in the name of students because, first of all, I'm not a student, and second of all, I wasn't. I never participated in any kind of talks with the representative of students. But I can tell you two things related to your question. First thing is that in every authoritarian regime, the best benefit that they can have is to make the best people stay away from participating in everyday life and making them not willing to take the role in the institutions. I don't consider myself the best people, but there is no way that I would be willing to take any kind of position in the government that's acting like this, not because of some high political, discrepancies, no, because there is no way for you to act independently and to really impose your ideas and your knowledge in the institutions you're working in. So there is really no way for you to really make a change, to make a tangible contribution. And this is something that no person of any quality will be able to accept. This will accept only somebody who is there at a position for some other benefit. So I cannot tell you what students are asking for, but I can tell you what would I suggest them to ask for. And this is something that, of course, bringing the institutions really to the level of independence, even basic level of independence, proves to be task too hard for our society for the last 30 years. So I really think that we don't have any kind of strategies, not even in foreign policy or internal policy. Those are only some letters just being there, put there, using for some kind of propaganda or so on and so on. I think that our society really have to support those institutions and people leading those institutions in a long way, but it's very hard because at some point it's going to affect all those people who should support it. For example, there are so many challenges whenever Professor also mentioned that whenever something is affecting you personally, you're trying to see, maybe this is not the most necessary thing there is, and this is something that actually the most people of the society has to be in accordance with. I said, we have to put up with some things for some short period of time in order for us to grow as a society. And this is something that I think that young people really are the main force of a change. There is no doubt about that. But they really need support of not so young people, actually more experienced people, and they really should rely on the people that really can take those changes to another level and make it permanent and institutionalized. That would be my suggestion.
Any other questions? Yes, thank you.
Sorry, not that I want to be too inflammatory, but inspired by all of you now, and we started with the lack of information, and we switched to, which I completely and would fully agree on, more the lack of education, which is probably, if we would have education, then also the information would have better recipients to be processed and maybe also applied in a different way. But then maybe a question now for Sofia Ventura. What in your, you gave also this, the first part was an overview of the historical development of the liberal state. So maybe a question in this regard, where did we lose the education? How did it get off the road? I mean, we apparently, if we would follow your, if we would have a graph showing this, we could also see that education was growing, education of the masses. So also not to say that I am in any kind of favor of excluding people from voting or from saying their opinion. I'm more thinking how to make them have an opinion that is digestible for themselves. So if we see the graph of education, we would see in Europe or in the Western world it was going up, and at one point it is going down. The quality of education is going down, or is it maybe going down due to other, due to the media that developed in a way in which it developed the last 20, 30 years? So is this the reason, according to you, or is it, I don't know, is it the neoliberal capitalistic system that is producing low-level education that we have now, so that we have masses being educated but not educated properly or enough to grasp the system?
It's a huge question. First of all, I'd like to remember the fact that the liberal state, the constitutional state, emerged in a period where only educated people participated to politics. And it's very important to stress this aspect, because the instruments, the tools of the liberal state, the constitutional state, was shaped in a period where few people with high level of education could understand how to shape the institution of a political community. Then the problem became how to extend the participation in these kind of institutions to the masses. And the answer was political parties. I mentioned, for example, the mass parties like the socialist parties, social democratic parties that had a very, very important role in aiding peoples, the masses entering in the political system. But after World War II, in particular after the 60s, 70s, the political parties and the mass parties lost their importance, and they lost their importance in favor of the media system. That's a problem. And so, obviously, the theme, the issue is enormous. But I think that the transition from a political system based on political parties and also where the media existed, obviously, but they were mainstream media with a high level of preparation of journalists, for example, and also different level of education. Nowadays, today we have a media system that is influenced by neoliberal capitalism. I am liberal, but I understand very well that the media today are more concerned in audience and resources and so on than in the quality of information. And for example, Italy is a typical example of the deterioration of democracy due to the weakened level of information given by the media system. So the problem is a very big problem, but I think that there also another aspect that is the role of elites, political elites, media elites, university elites. For example, in the university today, we are asked to not touch some items, some issues, because they are too hot, for example. So there is a vague concerning international politics. Young students are really influenced by some informational vague. And also at the academic level, we are not able to cope with this information, disinformation, but because also the academic institutions are not able and don't want to do it. So I think that another aspect is the weakness of the elite of the Western society. And I could continue, but I think that's really a huge question, a huge issue. But I think that the central point is the media system, the informational system that has not as his main goal to inform, to educate, as in the past, but to gain money.
Thank you very much. I would also say the loss of intellectuals, because the
Yes.
role of intellectuals who were like the head, the leaders, now the media leaders, like yes, please.
I mean, as an the economists generally profess the sad science, okay? This is the nickname of economics. So I would like to strike an optimistic note. I mean, we have to remember that memory is selective. We tend to remember of the past what is best, and we tend to forget what is painful. I'm not so sure that intellectuals of the past were better equipped to understand the surrounding world than we are. Probably the world has become more complex, and that has made the task of journalists a bit more difficult. And education now can be measured. I mean, we, for instance, the OECD has promoted this program called PISA, Program for Evaluation or Assessment of the Quality of Education, which has been, I mean, just for having the importance of it, teachers tend to despise it very much because it's an indirect evaluation of what they are doing. So basically it is effective. Okay, now we can use this information to direct and implement a better form of education. One thing that by my experience, when I teach economics to students, first-year students, so young minds that are not being affected very much by problems and so on and so forth, they are very high on dreams. But they don't know, they have a very low knowledge of the means that are needed to achieve these means. That is why, for instance, young students in France manifest against pension reforms. I think it's in their own best interest, because simply they don't understand. And why do they don't understand? Because they are not taught enough, in my opinion. This is my very personal opinion. I underwrite it to Fabio Padovano, nothing else, nobody else. Is that they are not taught disciplines that say, okay, the way to do that is this. You cannot find it in philosophy, you cannot find it easily in sociology, you cannot find, I mean, in the education in Latin or Greek or whatever. So, of course, it would be easy to say, teach economics in high school and so on and so forth, but in general, not just economics, we should be more realistic in what we teach to a new generation and teach more means as opposed to just goals, ends, dreams, which are very important because you need to inject fuel in new generations, but nevertheless you cannot just inject illusions. That's the point.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? Okay, so if not, I thank you very much, everyone. Pietro, sorry for the disturb. I would like to remind you, I am also referring to the online person, that we have 2 next stops. The next one is the 5th May in Podgorica, it's right, constitutionalism and market openness, and the last one will be in Tirana, 19 May, liberalism, education and entrepreneurship. But I would also like to remind you that if people participate, you would have the chance to be also in Trieste, because on the 15th of September we will have the last and final forum in Trieste, and students selected from the commission could have the chance to speak and to tell us about their idea of Europe. So thank you very much for everyone, and for, of course, Professor who spoke today with us. Thank you.